Welcome back, everyone. I trust that the breakout groups were both rich and deep, and now you're ready for sharing our knowledge together. It's my honor and pleasure to co-chair this second plenary panel with Her Excellency Minister Delma Thomas of Grenada. Je prends cette opportunité pour vous souhaiter la bienvenue et je remercie le peuple algonquin pour nous accueillir sur leur terre. For this panel, we will be reflecting on findings of the Guttmacher-Lancet Commission entitled Accelerate Progress, Sexual and Reproductive Rights and Health for All, providing us with a context on where we are now, looking towards the full realization of the ICPD Program of Action. In this regard, I'm pleased and honored to introduce you to Professor Alaka Basu, adjunct professor at the Cornell University and co-author of the report by the Commission on Sexual and Reproductive Rights. I welcome you to read the professor's full bio in the conference program and on the IPSI website. I will make a logistical note just before I ask Professor Basu to speak, and that is we're very mindful of the fact that we have a highly informed panel with lots to say, but much less time to say it than the program would have allowed. We've been running late, and we have a rather firm commitment for our reception. So I'm going to ask for forgiveness ahead of time to tell you that I'll be using my timer so that none of us steal the time of anyone else. Professor, my timer is set for 8 minutes for you with the grace period of
yes. Well, I'll try. I'll save 30 seconds by saying only thank you without naming anyone. So can I have the, yeah. So what I'm here to do is to present something that is already in your packets. I don't think you've had a chance to read it. It's the full report is on the Guttmacher-Lancet Commission on Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, and I was one of the commissioners. We were 16 commissioners from all over the world and 23 reviewers that really went with the tooth comb through the report. Now, what I'm going to do is just summarize a few of the more a few points that are that add to what we already know about the SRHR agenda, and make some comments on the circumstances and the justification for this report, as well as the philosophy underlying it. So that's what I'm going to do now. And so this report is with you. I don't have to, how does this work? How do I go up? I should have checked. The next slide. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this report really comes at a time when it's important because it's the 25th anniversary of ICPD coming up, but it's also important because if you look at the evolution of our discourse on the population and development agenda gradually evolving into an SRHR and development agenda, it's not actually a linear narrative. There have been ups and downs, there have been some disruptions, and so I just summarized them here. For instance, the 1950s to the 80s, as Rachel Snow said this morning, was the time of great interest in the population and development agenda, how population growth and numbers and distribution were bad for development, usually bad, sometimes good. But it was, and it needed 1994 for there to be this radical change in the paradigm at the ICPD to come up with the reproductive health and reproductive rights paradigm that you all know about. So I'm not going to say anything much about it, except to say that it was very radical at that time. It brought in things like family planning, MCH, infertility. I mean, you name it, and it was there. What it did not comment on so clearly was the question of rights, and especially sexual rights. It did talk about reproductive rights, not sexual rights. The Beijing Conference in 1995 reiterated ICPD and added women's rights as human rights. The MDGs actually took us a step backwards. In 2000, family planning was mentioned only in the context of condoms for HIV prevention, and it really needed a very strong activist push for, in 2007, the MDGs to now include universal access to family planning. The SDGs 2015, again, take us forward, but they don't take us forward in an integrated way on the question of SRHR. There's nothing on sexual rights, reproductive health, reproductive rights and sexual health are mentioned, but in different places it's scattered all over, especially in goals 3 and 5. It reiterates what was said in Cairo and Beijing, but it's not really about SRHR as being central to anything. There were more comprehensive and progressive regional agreements later on, but we also have had some setbacks. And so this seemed to be a good time for an outside organization to take on something like this. An outside organization because it was not hampered, for instance, by the need in these agreements to respect national sovereignty, to respect cultural imperatives. So it was at a time when it could actually talk, this commission was set up to really feel free, to think of utopia, to think that the reach must exceed the grasp, and to therefore think of what SRHR would look like in an ideal world, but then come back to earth and come back, suggest some practical policy and financial implications. So, and it's important for those reasons, but it's also important because there is still an unfinished agenda. Is that what I've got up there? Yeah, there's still an unfinished agenda, which is I'm not going to, since I don't have time, repeat it here, but you can see that we have lots of problems yet. Too many women without access to family planning, too many unsafe abortions, too many people dying of cervical cancer, and so on and so on. So 25 years seems like it is a quarter century, but we haven't come as far as we thought. So the ICPD plus 25 is a good time to take stock. It's also a good time, historical point right now. Lots of positive things are happening. We've had achievements, and positive things include what we just heard, an excellent description of the abortion referendum in Ireland, for example. We know there's been progress on gay rights. We have the Me Too movement, which seems to be rippling. The last 10 days in India has been in the throes of its own Me Too movement. Gender equality and women's empowerment have now almost become household words, even if they're largely platitudes. But we also have negative pushback against many of these things. There are several, again, which I won't go into, except to mention important policy changes, which include the Mexico City policy being reinstated by President Trump, and today, and this morning I just read about the possibility that he is going to do something to de-recognize the transgender community. So there are problems too. There are problems with civil society. One likes to think of civil society as being progressive and marching onwards and upwards for the good of all, but we often are seeing increasing examples of regressive civil society initiatives, moral policing, punishment at the non-judicial level of transgressions in sexual and reproductive health matters, especially by women. And so this commission felt that it was a good time to set aside, to acknowledge these things, acknowledge new research findings, to push aside the curtain of cultural sensitivity, which is too often used really to endorse patriarchy and toxic masculinity. So to be freed of that need to use patriarchy as a cover for not going far enough. And so it is utopian to that extent. And I won't say it now if I have time. So it set up this partnership of 16 commissioners, as I said, and it came up with this report, which you have access to. A few things that the report is trying to do. It's trying to come up with a new and expanded comprehensive integrated definition of sexual and reproductive health, which, as I said, is already in your folder, so I won't elaborate on it, except to say that it includes an interconnected set of reproductive health and reproductive rights, and sexual health and sexual rights. The last one is important because it's not usually something that one can get consensus on, and we felt on the commission that we still needed to speak out on it. So reproductive health and rights, our definition includes all the standard things that are already there in Cairo, but then we give much more emphasis in the current climate to prevention and treatment of gender-based violence, to universal reproductive services, which include safe abortion access, which in turn means more than post-abortion care, which is as far as most agreements were able to go, or in situation, and keeping in mind the laws on abortion. So we go further than that and talk about safe abortion care as not just post-abortion care, but also safe abortions in societies where it is legal, but also very clearly asking for an expansion of the conditions under which abortion is legal. Prevention and treatment of fertility, menstrual health, HIV, etc., but also reproductive tract cancers are given a lot of importance in this report. So then we have a large section on sexual rights and health, and this is the part that is missing from most earlier documents. And so we do talk about the right in particular to decide if, when, with whom to engage in, and here I put it in capitals, being very aware of talking about the right to unfettered sexual activity is not what sexual right is about. It's about the right to decide if, when, with whom to engage in consensual sexual relations, including the autonomous right of sexual minorities and gender identities, the right to satisfactory and pleasurable sexual relations, the treatment of sexual disorders, and the right to have gender equity in marriage and in the dissolution of marriage. But at the same time, we talk about all these things, but we realize that these are not all the mandate of a reproductive health program on the ground tomorrow. So we talk about, and we are very well aware that there are a lot of these, some of this work in SRHR requires programs. A lot of it actually requires changes in laws and regulations, education, advocacy for cultural change, and we identify certain high priority legal and policy reforms in this area, which include the banning of child marriage and FGM and other harmful practices. 30 seconds. Liberalizing abortion laws and protecting the rights of sexual minorities. Then I won't go into this. We also talk about vulnerable groups, because to me at least it appears that the presence of disadvantaged groups is one more expression of patriarchy. Patriarchy and gender is not just about male-female relations, it's really about unequal relationships of power. So it's also a metaphor really for unequal power relationships. And finally, we talk about what is to be done, where we discuss in detail. What we had was the advantage of being able to actually put numbers to some of these things, and we come up with a figure of $9 per person in the developing world to provide a pretty universal set of minimum services, which include contraception, abortion, and maternal and newborn health care. This is the basic reproductive health package, which would cost about $9, which is very affordable, and because it's only about $4 more than what is already being spent, but being spent, maybe that's not enough, and maybe being spent more inefficiently, and would also actually lead to greater returns on investment if it is spent well. For example, if we have better contraception and abortion, there'll be fewer unwanted babies and mothers whose maternal and child needs have to be taken care of. But we recognize also that there's still a lot of need for more research, for more development of concepts, development of targets on all these issues: infertility, men's health, reproductive health, etc. If I had time, I would have another paragraph here. But finally, tell you that it's all available in your package, but there are several more resources on the Commission's report which are available on the website. And then I have to do what we all do, which is acknowledge that this report wouldn't have been possible without the funders, and these are all the people we have to thank for it. Thank you so much. That was fast.
Yes. I think we owe an extra debt of thanks for the efficiency of that. Thank you so much, Professor Basu. And I know you'll remain available when we get to the question and answer portion of the panel. I'm now very pleased to ask my co-chair, Minister Thomas, if you would take over and ask the questions of, yes, you can stay where you are, everybody's mic'd, that's not a problem at all. And I will again ask for your forgiveness because Minister Thomas will facilitate, but I will remain the timekeeper. So everyone gets 3 minutes and then a little bit of time to wrap up.
Thank you, Senator Marilou McPhedran. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our 5 distinguished parliamentarians from all regions of the world. We will ask each of you 2 questions and invite you to answer from the national or regional perspective. Our first question will go to Honorable Chris, Minister of Housing, Uganda. What particular restriction currently exists for women and girls in your region, and what can be done to overcome them?
Thank you very much, and good evening. Well, since the ICPD, I think a lot of progress has been registered in terms of addressing most of the barriers and restrictions. But also when you look at Africa, there are differences when you look at sub-regions. The northern part of Africa, the southern part of Africa have made much more advances compared to the western, central, and eastern region. So there is progress, although the progress in Africa generally is a bit slow. In terms of specific restrictions, if I look at Uganda, where I come from, in terms of legal and policy measures, I think we've been able to enact a number of legislations, a number of policies to address these barriers. But what I can specifically bring out is like on access to safe abortion. We still have a restrictive legal regime where most of the women cannot access safe abortion. Like in many other countries, abortion is only allowed in situations where pregnancy is life-threatening for a mother. And at least 2 medical officers have to agree in order to terminate that pregnancy. And that means most of the abortions which do occur are illegal, unlawful abortions. And yet we have very high maternal mortality rates. In the last 40 years, our maternal mortality ratio was estimated at about 700 deaths per 100,000 live births. This has reduced to 336, and abortions and post-abortion complications contribute about 30% of the maternal deaths. So that's a challenge. The other restriction which I could look at, that recently we wrote the comprehensive sexuality education policy, which we finalized as a government through consultations. But when we went to publish it, we got severe resistance from some of the religious leaders and cultural leaders. Again, that impacts negatively on access to services and information for the young people. The other area I could look at is that in Africa, we still have very strong cultures and strong religion, and the social-cultural aspects impede negatively on promotion of sexual reproductive health and rights. And that's across most of sub-Saharan Africa. And more needs to be done to confront that challenge of the culture and the social norms within our situation. When I stood for a member of parliament in my community, I was leaving UNFPA where I was working as a technical officer. I have 2 children. A number of people refused to vote me because I have only 2 children. They expected me to have more children because I am a doctor, I am rich by our standards, and that tells you how our society looks at some of these issues. But we are doing all it takes to educate our population. Finally, the other challenge that I see, which is a barrier or restriction, is maybe we are not investing adequately in this area. So lack of resources, that results into failure to access some of the services and technologies for these women, and that impacts negatively on access to reproductive health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. You have given us a lot of food for thought as it relates to your region. And my next question would go to Honorable Wafa, Saeed, Yacoub, Bani, Moustafa, MP from Jordan. And the question is similar. What particular restriction currently exists for women and girls in your region? And what can be done to overcome them?
شكرا. سأتحدث بالعربية. شكرا للمنظمين وللبرلمان الكندي على الاستضافة. أرجو أن لا تحتسب الوقت لغاية وضع السماعات والترجمة. بالحقيقة احنا في الثلاث دقائق لا يمكن لنا أن نتحدث عن كل العقبات اللي بتواجه النساء في الأردن وفي المنطقة بصورة عامة، حيث هنالك عدد كبير جدا من التحديات المشتركة، لكن هذا لا يمنعنا أن ننظر إلى أننا نسير في طريق إيجابي. يعني هنالك تطور أيضا مهم وكبير في عدد كبير جدا من القوانين في الأردن، وأهمها قانون العقوبات الأردني، حيث أننا مؤخرا وقبل عام وشهرين قمنا بإلغاء المادة الخاصة بالزواج المغتصب من المغتصبة والإفلات من العقاب. أيضا قمنا بتجريم كافة أشكال التحرش الجنسي. قمنا بإزالة كافة الأعذار التي يمكن أن يستفيد منها المجرم إذا ما قام بجريمة قتل تخص امرأة، وفيما يعرف بجرائم الشرف، وهذا انتهى تماما في قانون العقوبات الأردني. لكن بقيت هنالك العديد من التحديات على المستوى الثقافي. نحن مجتمع ذكوري. أيضا تحديات على مستوى وأشارك الأخ من أوغندا، تحديات على مستوى قادة الرأي وأهمية الدين في المجتمع والقدرة على التأثير في المجتمع، غياب التعليم الجنسي والثقافة الجنسية والإنجابية عن المناهج المدرسية بصورة يعني شبه تامة. أيضا في هنالك ظروف استثنائية أثرت كثيرا في الخطط المرسومة لبلدي. الظروف الخاصة بالصراع في المنطقة، لا يمكن أن نقلل من شأن وجود عدد كبير جدا من اللاجئين وضغطه على المرافق الصحية والتعليمية. هذه أمور لم تكن يعني في الحسبان. عادت أمراض سارية في بعض المناطق في الأردن بعد أن كنا قد انتهينا منها من وقت طويل جدا. مؤخرا تقليص الخدمات أيضا الخاص بوكالة غوث اللاجئين الأونروا سيؤدي إلى الكثير أيضا من الضغط على بلدي وعلى الموازنة الخاصة بتقديم الخدمات لكل القاطنين على الأراضي الأردنية. بصورة خاصة تعاني النساء من عدة تحديات، أهمها ما يتعلق بالجنسية. قانوننا لا يسمح بأن تمرر الأم التي تتزوج من أجنبي الجنسية لأبنائها، وبالتالي هذا يشكل عائق كبير جدا. حاولنا أن نجد يعني ما يسمى بالحلول الذكية لتعثر قدرتنا على تمرير قانون للجنسية حاليا، وقمنا بإصدار البطاقات التعريفية لأبناء الأردنيات المتزوجات من أجانب حتى نضمن الخدمات في عدد من الأشياء المهمة والأساسية، وأهمها التعليم والصحة. قانون الأحوال الشخصية لا زال يشكل أيضا واحدة من العوائق، لأنه هنالك مشكلة في إثبات النسب، مشكلة في سن الزواج والسماح باستثناء القاصرات اللي أقل من 18 وأكبر من 15 والسماح لهن بالزواج في ظروف معينة. أعتقد بأنه أيضا في لدينا مشكلة في الميراث ودليل ذلك الحجم القليل الذي يمكن للنساء أن تمرر فيه أو أن تحصل فيه على ملكية الأراضي. تطلب مني الرئيسة التوقف. بطالة النساء، وهذه آخر كلمة سأقولها، بطالة النساء في الأردن تكاد تكون الأعلى في العالم، 30%، وهذا معدل عالي ومرتفع جدا، نظرا لأن النساء الأردنيات متعلمات ولكنهن لا يستطيعن الدخول إلى سوق العمل. شكرا.
Thank you. Our next question goes to Honorable Anne Sudmalis, MP from Australia. How is our country, or is your country gearing up to achieve SDG 4 and 5 on health and gender equality, which are crucial to the SRHR?
Oh, thank you very much, and bonsoir, everybody, and that's my limit to French. Just wanted to put a little context here and make it a little bit more humorous, and that is, I don't think that we should be dealing with just sexual and reproductive health. It should be common sexual health connected with common sense, SEN-SE, and common sense, CENTS. Because until we start to rationalise what we do in terms of the economic return on investment, and thank goodness I heard it in the last session, the other part of our political system will never recognise the heart that we need to take forward in order to get this agenda prosecuted. Until you can actually validate the actions that you take to make sure that sexual reproductive health and rights are maintained in our nations and our neighbours, because we take this very seriously in the Pacific. We do a lot of work with the Pacific nations. Then we are never going to accelerate the change that we need to do for gender equity. And it's in that context that I just mentioned the fact that we've had a 12-year plan to reduce domestic violence against women. It was begun in 2010. And it's for 3 years, because unfortunately our election cycles are only 3 years. But we are now on the 4th planning stage of that 12-year program. And it had 6 priorities. That was to produce safer communities where people were not only aware of domestic violence, but there were services available for them. In the 2017 report on the first couple, we did okay there. Public awareness is raised and there are more services. They're a tad underfunded, but there are services there. We needed to get respectful relationships. How on earth you measure that, I have no idea. But anyway, that was one of the priorities. The third one was to strengthen Indigenous communities. And we have started with some of that, and for better or for worse, we experimented with a thing called a cashless debit card. We have a very generous welfare system in Australia, but these 2 communities, and now we have a mixed population community where they were not allowed to buy alcohol or tobacco. And the presentations to hospital, to the police station, car accidents are all down in those. So our women folk in those communities are being protected. So it's been a very good way of getting gender equity happening there and honouring women as we should. We are getting a better response in the judicial system, but not so much for our Indigenous people who actually need a different way of approaching justice in their community rather than for some of our more remote Indigenous people. They call it white fella law and they're not happy with it. But we are making some very good inroads there. One of the other ones is on intervention with perpetrators in domestic violence. We're not getting enough services there to stop them coming back and doing it again. It's all right throwing them in jail to begin with, and then what happens when they go home? But I was mentioning just a few things that I think are very important about what we do and how we relate in the Pacific. We help to fund a lot of programs in the Pacific, and they really make a difference. In PNG, Save the Children have got a fabulous program for the LGBTI young people. They have a safe place in Port Moresby, and then those young people are empowered and enabled to go out and talk to other young people and make them feel that their way of life, their choice in life is better, and they're okay, and they're allowed to express it, because those ways of life are illegal in PNG. In the Solomon Islands, the DVA have established a safe house just near the police station. So has Myanmar, and there are a couple of other programs. I've just been shown the stop sign. Love to talk to anybody else about these programs. They are fabulous. They enable women, they empower women, and they're common sense and common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Member of Parliament. My next question is to similar question as Australia, to Senator Catherine Noone of Ireland, where we had a positive experience of the recent referendum. how is your country gearing up to achieve SDG 4 and 5 on health and gender equality, which are crucial to the sexual and health rights?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and apologies to anyone who was in the previous session with me, because there'll probably be a little bit of repetition on this one, but I'll be very brief. We've obviously had a very successful result in Ireland recently. We had a referendum in May, which was the end of a almost 2-year, 1.5-year process in deliberative democracy, which I think is something that other countries could learn from. We had an amendment in the Constitution that was put in there in 1983, which gave equal right to life to the unborn child as to the mother. So that's when the campaign started. Many politicians, even my own party, would have resisted that at that time. But a 35-year campaign basically ended last May when 66.4% of the Irish population voted to liberalise our abortion laws. So it was really quite amazing. The Citizens' Assembly was established, and it was much maligned at the time because it was felt that it was kicking an issue further down the road that had been put off. Parliamentarians didn't want to deal with this. You have to remember the type of country that Ireland is or was, a very Catholic, conservative country for many years, a very close relationship between the people and the Catholic Church. And we've come a long way in a relatively short period of time, it appears. So the Citizens' Assembly was 99 ordinary members of the population who sat down and reviewed the issue. Then the second part of the process was to come into the committee which I chaired in the Parliament. So the recommendations from that assembly were reviewed by us in Parliament, and it was a very intense, quite difficult process. Personally, there is a fallout. It can be very difficult. Even today, no matter what happens on social media in my political life, I get intense abuse every day because of this process. So, it does come at a personal cost to parliamentarians, but to me, it's worth it. But it can be very hard. So really, the reason I'm talking about this, obviously, it would be foolish not to, in this environment, tell you of this positive outcome as a result of deliberative democracy. We had a Citizens' Assembly, a parliamentary committee, which sat just for 3 months, and everybody thought that it wouldn't provide a report on time, that it was too divisive an issue, but we did. And then we had a 5-month referendum campaign. My colleague, Senator Clifford Lee, would have also been very involved in the campaign, who's also here from Ireland. We worked cross-party. The women in the Parliament ran this. We a lot of very good men helped and were very brave also, but the women really pushed this, and it's a real reason for more women in politics, if nothing else, in this particular area. So it was an extremely intense, difficult campaign, and the thing that we have all learned from it, I suppose, that could be useful to other countries who are here today, is that it can be done. Little Catholic conservative Ireland voted 66.4, nearly 2/3 of our population voted to go from a situation where women couldn't access abortion, even in the case of rape. We had an English solution to an Irish problem where our women would leave them in the morning, travel to the UK, have an abortion, come home bleeding in the evening. That is what happened in Ireland for 35 years. It's still happening today because the laws won't be actually in effect until January. So it's a very good example and should give great heart to countries like Argentina and other countries where there is a struggle. We've struggled over the years. It took years, just keep the faith. We had a very patriarchal society, and a lot of those patriarchs, they're leaving the scene now, and I know it's different in different countries, and we had a very interesting discussion just before this in one of the other rooms about, what works in different countries doesn't necessarily work in another country. But I would say for anyone who's working on these issues, I'm very lucky in that I come from a very developed democracy, And I'm so proud to have played a part in what we achieved. It makes me really emotional. It was amazing, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Brenda Austin, MP, Argentina, where we have an example of a recent abortion law. My question to you, are there recent developments in your country that others should be aware of? Give us a brief overview, if yes.
I should have taken these off while I was speaking.
Bueno, primero que nada, agradecer por la invitación a formar parte de este panel. La verdad que es difícil en 3 minutos tratar de contar un poco el proceso que tuvo o que llevó adelante mi país. Me quedo con esto que recién decía la compañera de Irlanda, de no pierdan la fe. El proceso de Argentina tuvo luces y sombras, tuvo situaciones de mucho avance, fundamentalmente a partir de un movimiento de mujeres que fue creciendo a lo largo del tiempo, que fue desarrollando desde Ni Una Menos, un movimiento creado para denunciar los femicidios, que logró poner al feminismo en el centro de la escena política con capacidad para pensar acciones. Esto, sumado a 2 factores más, la decisión de un presidente de permitir el debate en el Parlamento, y el tercero, y para mí muy importante, que no ha formado parte de los planteos hasta acá, la transversalidad política, la capacidad de encontrar en las diputadas de otros bloques, de otros partidos, los acuerdos estratégicos para llevar adelante acciones concretas, leyes. Esto para Argentina tuvo como primer resultado la ley de paridad, una ley que si hubiese sido por la decisión de nuestros bloques políticos no la hubiésemos logrado aprobar, y que sin embargo pudimos hacerlo a las 3 de la madrugada por un acuerdo entre todas las diputadas que estábamos sentadas en el Parlamento. Esto fue un antecedente indispensable para la votación o para que llegáramos a la discusión del aborto. Las autoridades de nuestros partidos dijeron, mejor encaucemos este debate antes que un día a las 3 de la mañana las diputadas se pongan de acuerdo y se convierta en ley. Eso permitió que a comienzos de este año empezáramos en la Cámara de Diputados a discutir la reforma de una ley que es de 1921, que establecía primero ciertos supuestos, el aborto en ciertos supuestos, en los casos de violación de una mujer con discapacidad, y que luego la Corte Suprema había extendido a los casos, a todos los casos de violación, a todos los casos donde estuviera en riesgo la salud de la mujer, desde un punto de vista integral, física, psíquica, social, y a los casos, obviamente, donde habían sido sin consentimiento o en situaciones de discapacidad. Es decir, la línea de partida de Argentina era bastante mejor que la de muchos de los países que contaron sus experiencias hasta el momento. Veníamos también de una década de leyes importantes como la ley de matrimonio igualitario, la ley de identidad de género, las leyes de salud sexual y reproductiva, la ley de educación sexual integral, y sin embargo nunca habíamos logrado discutir el aborto en el Parlamento. Durante 12 años se presentaron proyectos y el tema ni siquiera se discutía en una comisión. Entonces, para mí el primer aprendizaje tiene que ver con esto, con animarnos a asumir el costo político que implica salir de las posiciones neutras, argumentar, sostener, pero además también, y esto forma parte de las sombras del proceso, tratar de aportar en la construcción desde los datos, pero también desde la emocionalidad. Quizás si uno mira por qué fracasó finalmente la ley, digo, no me deben quedar mucho tiempo, pero nosotros logramos la media sanción en la Cámara de Diputados porque todo esto estuvo articulado, porque el movimiento de la calle, las organizaciones sociales, el feminismo, estaba en un diálogo permanente con las diputadas de distintos bloques políticos que sosteníamos la ley. Y eso que se conoció además como la revolución de las hijas, un movimiento generacional enorme que permitió que en todas las escuelas del país las jóvenes, las adolescentes llevaran sus pañuelos verdes, el lema de la campaña, peleando por el reconocimiento de este derecho. Llegamos al Senado, una Cámara históricamente más conservadora que representa de manera igualitaria a todos los distritos subnacionales, a las provincias, con el movimiento antiderechos creciendo, organizándose, empezando a preocuparse porque esto podía convertirse en ley. Y haciendo ya desde el uso de la emocionalidad, por eso decía, cuando nosotros elegimos los datos, no perder la emocionalidad desde la que narramos las historias, seguir usando las historias individuales de las mujeres que conocemos, porque sin lugar a duda que tiene que ver con la construcción de la sensibilidad que necesitamos para avanzar en la ley. Finalmente, para cerrar, decir que si bien no logramos que el Senado por pocos votos lo convirtiera en ley, quedó un enorme camino por recorrer. Quedaron esta transversalidad abierta que nos permitió sacar muchas leyes más, leyes sobre abuso sexual infantil, una discusión para reforzar la ley de educación sexual integral, leyes sobre Estado laico que estamos discutiendo ahora, y del otro lado también la redacción que conversábamos en el panel anterior. Creo que no hay que dejar de mirarlo, creo que este espacio debe servirnos para organizar nuestra acción frente a la redacción que es fuerte, que es sistémica y que realmente tiene muchísima potencialidad de daño en nuestros países. Ojalá que podamos hacerlo juntos en el trabajo articulado con la experiencia de cada uno.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Honored delegates, we, as a result of the program taking more time up until now, we now really need to make a decision, and that is whether there are those who would like to address questions to the panelists, including our keynote speaker, Professor Basu. Is there anyone who would like to come to the mics and address the panelists? Yeah, and if we could just ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, if you don't mind, I'm just going to remove the mic. Well, I don't think I can. I hope I can.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. If you don't mind me sitting, actually. I thought the example of...
Who are you?
Oh, hi. The name is Alando Terrelon from Jamaica, Member of Parliament and also State Minister for Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports. It really is an honor to be here with you all and to be discussing themes over 2 days relating to, women and sexual and reproductive health. But what I like also, I like the fact that we've recognized that sexual and reproductive health is not just about women, it's also about men as well. And I love the recognition of the fact that we need to include men in the discussion, especially if we're going to change attitudes relating to gender-based violence in particular. And the fact that there are a lot of men who, without the knowledge and education, believe, whether by virtue of religious politicization or cultural politicization, that they actually own the bodies of women and that they can make laws to govern the bodies of women without giving them that right. So I love the general broad base of the discussions here today. For Ireland, I recall when I was doing my research to write on legalization of abortion and really to abolish this rather antiquated law that we got from the British, And I remember reading about the case of the young, I believe the young Indian, she was from Hindu heritage. And I was just speaking to your colleague and asking her if that contributed to the work that was done in Ireland. And she said yes. So if you could tell us just some more about that experience. I know it was very, it really got a lot of international attention and it helped to push.
It's a really important point because it's something we touched on in the earlier discussion, that the human examples, and Lorraine and I were talking about this earlier on, the human examples of the women and the men and the families and the doctors who experience this on a daily basis, they were very much to the fore of the campaign. But the campaign to have a referendum got huge momentum from the case of Safita Halapanavar. She was a young Indian woman who was pregnant and living here, a pharmacist, or living in Ireland, and feeling at home, obviously. But she was a pharmacist and, an educated woman, and she knew how sick she was in hospital, and she had a case of sepsis, and she felt she was going to die. All the signs were showing that she was very, very ill. But there was a huge debate amongst the doctors. Well, there's a lot of argument on either side, depending on whether you're pro-choice or anti-choice with regard to this particular case. But the reality is that she had sepsis, she died, she should have had an abortion, she'd be alive, and that really, people took to the streets in Ireland because of that. And it did precipitate the referendum in a way. It really pushed it up the agenda. It became much more in the public's consciousness. So yeah, it was a pivotal time in Ireland.
Right, thank you. And having had her explain that, what I wish to say to everyone here is, in your own countries, find those human examples. Find them, because they can help to push
Yeah,
public
they do,
opinion.
yeah.
It's one thing to say, okay, well, there's 20% this or 5% that. It's one thing when you use figures.
People
But
don't
when
care
you
about
can
stats,
say,
yeah.
when you can say, there is this story, there was this young girl. So in my country, for example, in 2013, there was a 15-year-old girl who died at the hospital because by the time she came in, it was too late, and she had gone to a crackpot doctor who did a botched abortion. You know, so those are some of the examples that we are in fact using. I mean, 2016 we had someone dying again. 2017 was someone dying again. So it really does help to shape the narrative. So what's happening now in Jamaica is that even though we've had much delays, as far back as 1975, we had one Minister of Health who ordered a commission to look into abortion. But of course, you know, abortion is one of those topics that tend to be politically polarizing. And so both sides of the political divide have been in fact playing this sort of political football with the issue. Thankfully, we now have a Prime Minister who believes that the voices of persons, including marginalized persons, should be heard. And so one member of parliament has in fact raised the issue again by virtue of a private member's debate in parliament to discuss the issue of abortion. The health minister will close on it either tomorrow or next week Tuesday when we have parliament. So I'm hoping that more parliamentarians are in fact brave enough to look at the issue, because if we can save even the life of one woman, then it would certainly be worth it. So real life issues does in fact help to push the debate forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone at the front, please.
Gracias. Yo quisiera preguntarle a todas las panelistas, especialmente a Irlanda y Argentina, ¿cuáles han sido los argumentos que más pesaron para una decisión a favor y una decisión en contra por parte de las y los parlamentarios? Es decir, tal cual, el pecado, el cielo, el infierno. ¿Cuáles eran los argumentos? Porque son argumentos que de verdad están muy, muy pesados. Y yo quisiera saberlos, porque es seguramente lo que tendremos que seguir combatiendo.
May I just ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, mi nombre es Marta Lucía Micher Camarena, soy senadora de México.
La verdad que yo voy a tratar brevemente de denunciar los que para mí fueron más resonantes en el debate. Los argumentos de quienes votamos a favor de la ley pasaban fundamentalmente, bueno, por mucho de lo que hemos hablado acá, un proceso de reconocimiento de los derechos de las mujeres, del derecho a decidir sobre su propio cuerpo, de un marco de tratados internacionales que para nuestro país tiene jerarquía constitucional, y de los informes de monitoreo de todos los organismos, tanto el Comité de los Derechos del Niño, el Comité de la CEDAW, el de los pactos internacionales, la Convención Americana, que le pedían a Argentina que estableciera parámetros de acceso igualitario para abortos seguros, sobre todo para niñas y adolescentes. La evidencia clara de que los países que habían legalizado el aborto no habían visto aumentar el número de abortos, sino que por el contrario, los informes mostraban que incluso habían disminuido. Tuvimos la posibilidad de contar con la experiencia de Canadá, de la Ciudad de México, de Uruguay, de compañeras de distintos lugares del planeta contando y mostrando evidencia empírica de esto. ¿Qué hubo del otro lado? ¿Qué no quisimos nosotros poner en el centro de la escena por respeto a las mujeres? Historias de vida individuales. Tratar de que esos sean los relatos que se escucharan en el Parlamento. Preferimos la evidencia empírica, científica, médica y los informes constitucionales que avalaban, digamos, que avanzáramos en este sentido. Del otro lado hubo lo contrario. Hubo un mensaje sostenido primero en relativizar la información científica, en acusar incluso a la Organización Mundial de la Salud de que sus informes y sus posiciones estaban sesgadas por esta supuesta ideología de género, lo mismo a los comités de monitoreo, argumentar que era inconstitucional en nuestro país, algo con una agenda de abogados constitucionalistas para hacerlo, y finalmente recurrir a los relatos de primeras personas de personas cuyas madres quisieron abortarlos y habían sobrevivido, ¿no? O de mujeres que se habían arrepentido. Y tratar por contraste al argumento de la campaña, que era educación sexual para decidir, anticonceptivos para no abortar y aborto legal para no morir, contraponer el argumento de salvemos las dos vidas, no debemos resignarnos a que ninguna mujer muera, pero tampoco a la muerte de los niños por nacer, ¿no? Es decir, en mi opinión eran argumentos científicos versus falacias, pero obviamente eso tuvo muchísima capacidad de instalación también en la sociedad argentina.
Just in relation to the Irish case, I suppose there are loads of arguments, but I just wrote down a few while my colleague was speaking. On the pro-choice, the yes side, compassion was used a lot. And like our Jamaican colleague has said, it is very much the emotional, like I hear you talk about statistics, but it's the emotional piece that worked very effectively in the campaign in Ireland. Abortion pills became a very big feature of the campaign because, you know, the image of a teenage girl taking a pill in the privacy of her bedroom, you know, afraid to go to a doctor because it's illegal and there are criminal sanctions. Not that they're necessarily imposed, but, you know, that idea that it was a criminal act, the shame for women, you know, that was hugely important for parliamentarians in bringing the referendum to the point that we did, which was a 12-week regime where you could have abortion in any circumstance in the country. But also that liberalisation would actually result in a reduction of the amount of abortions that would be necessary. And the sex education piece there, where we really need to bring ourselves into the 21st century in Ireland, because sometimes still the Catholic Church are involved in sex education. So that's a huge discussion. And then what resonated very well was, you know, even our Minister for Health was saying things like, these are our sisters, our neighbours, our mothers, our aunts. These are our women, our friends. And there was a perception that there was an urban kind of loose woman that was off having an abortion because she didn't bother to use contraception. You know, that it was shown in the stats that, you know, there were some in Dublin, you know, but there were plenty, and it was representative of the population in rural areas, urban areas, that it was just real women in crisis situations. But the no side used, the big argument they had is, don't trust politicians. Because effectively, we would be putting this into the hands of legislators to legislate for. Don't trust politicians. That was their big argument. Women will use it as a contraception. You know, that is so disrespectful to women, actually. You know, and that was a huge argument that and one thing that it takes a certain kind of creative thinking to come up with was that men, I saw it a good few times in the debate, that men would somehow find it more easy to have sex with women because there is abortion. Because naturally women are just going to have abortions, you know, that we're going to be queuing up because there is suddenly abortion in the country. And then that the amount of babies with Down syndrome or other disabilities would be dramatically increased. But the reality is that we're so close to the United Kingdom that people don't not spend €100 if they've had a test to go to the UK and do it, notwithstanding how difficult that is to do. That really wasn't stopping most people. And that was a big argument on the pro-life side as well. And any other argument you can think of that they used to undermine women. And, you know, really, people did not listen to that scaremongering. They voted massively because they listened to the personal stories of people who have lived through this crisis and this difficulty. And, you know, they voted in favor of them. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I think our colleague from Jordan wants to respond as well.
يعني بالحقيقة هو الموضوع احنا عندنا في الأردن الإجهاض القانوني مسموح فيه، لكن المشكلة أنه هذا الموضوع يثير دائما الانقسام في داخل المجتمع. وزي ما حكوا من الأرجنتين ومن إيرلندا، يمكن هي تتكلم عن الكنيسة الكاثوليكية احنا الكنائس والرجال الدين الإسلامي كان ولا زال في معارضة كبيرة جدا لهذا الموضوع، فدائما الجدل لدينا أو من هم ضد الموضوع يقولون بأنه مخالف للدين بصورة مطلقة، لكن كان في هنالك فتاوى صدرت عن بعض المرجعيات التي أجازت ذلك. مثلا عندنا حالة خاصة بالنساء اللاجئات السوريات اللي تم استخدامهم كأدوات للحرب والنزاع وتعرضوا إلى مآسي جنسية وتم اغتصابهم كأداة من أدوات الحرب في الصراع السوري. يعني كان في هنالك بعض التساهل مع هذه الحالات وتم إصدار بعض الفتاوى التي أجازت إجهاض بصورة عامة لهذه الحالات. لكن دائما حق الحياة للأطفال أو للأجنة بعد التكون بعد ال3 شهور، هذا هو المانع الأول. يعني كما تم الإشارة من جامايكا إلى أنه خلف كل رقم قصة وإذا إحنا بنستطيع ننقذ حياة أيضا في الجانب المقابل هنالك من يقولون لماذا لا نستطيع إنقاذ حياة طفل أو جنين. فدائما هذا يعني الحوار أنا بعتقد أنه لا منتصر فيه، لأنه دائما يعني في حالة من الانقسام الكبيرة جدا داخل المجتمعات، خصوصا المجتمعات اللي عندها تشريعات وقوانين تستند إلى أسس دينية. بعتقد الموضوع مش راح يكون سهل، ونحن ثار لدينا جدال كبير جدا بعد إلغائنا للمادة الخاصة بتزويج المغتصب من المغتصبة، لأنه كانت هذه طريقة للهروب من العقاب والهروب من كل شيء. الآن ثار جدل حول تشريع الإجهاض بعد إلغاء هذه المادة، وأعتقد بأنه الطريق إلى ذلك لن تكون سهلة أو مفروشة بالورود، ورح يكون في معاناة كبيرة جدا لإقرار أي تشريع يخص الإجهاض في الأردن.
Thank you. Thank you. We have 5 minutes left and one last question, please, if you would introduce yourself and ask the question.
Merci. Touria Faraj, parlementaire marocaine. Donc, de mon côté, je peux dire que l'avortement dans plusieurs pays, c'est un tabou. Alors, le Maroc, je me permets de partager notre expérience parce que le code pénal marocain incrimine et pénalise sévèrement l'interruption volontaire de la grossesse, sauf pour l'avortement thérapeutique. Cette restriction interdit aux femmes en état de grossesse non désirée de bénéficier de services de santé publique, les contraignant à faire usage de moyens nuisibles dans des conditions précaires et parfois dangereuses. Alors, un débat national a été organisé par le ministère de la Santé. Donc voilà la volonté politique. Quand je dis quand la volonté politique et la volonté nationale s'entraident, donc on trouvera toujours des solutions qui sont intelligentes. Alors, j'ai dit que le ministère de la Santé, il a préconisé un dialogue. Et ce dialogue-là, il a divisé l'opinion publique, des gens qui sont pour et des gens qui sont contre. Alors, ce qui a suscité l'intervention du roi, donc ici, il y a la volonté nationale qui a préconisé une réforme du code pénal élargissant et ramène de nouvelles dispositions sur l'IVG. À savoir, en cas de viol, on peut faire l'interruption volontaire de la grossesse. En cas d'inceste, on peut faire l'interruption volontaire de la grossesse. En cas de maladie mentale, on peut faire l'interruption volontaire de la grossesse. Donc ceci, c'est-à-dire il a éliminé la restriction pour des maladies thérapeutiques pour la grossesse. Il a pu élargir ce qui ne répond pas aux attentes de notre population, mais c'est quand même un gain dans la démarche de développement. Et merci.
Thank you. I'm wondering if
It's really more of a comment.
Yes, it is. Thank you. It's a closing comment, which we appreciate the information about Morocco. And if I may ask Minister Thomas to just make brief closing remarks, and then we'll be asking Neil Dada to join us to bring a close to the first day of the conference.
Thank you. This is a very fruitful and excellent discussion. I guess every one of us will agree. I would like to thank our panelists for the stimulating comments and stimulating discussions. This concludes our second session. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much to our wonderful co-chairs and to the excellent panelists. Before you leave, a little token of appreciation, as has become customary. So if you stay, we'll get something for you.
While everything's being handed out,
And so thank you very much. I'll invite you to regain your seats. And we haven't forgotten two people who have made very important contributions. So I'd also like to recognize and invite Dr. Alaka Basu and Rachel Snow to receive a little token of our appreciation for your keynote interventions in each of the plenaries. So if I can invite you up here very briefly.
Very little time.